Welcome to the Capstone Conversation, the East Bay's best podcast. Hosted by Jared Asch, bringing you in-depth conversations with the leaders shaping your community.
Today, we are going to dive into water and wastewater. What is happening in the East Bay with Luz Gomez, who is the current chair of the board for East Bay MUD, the Municipal Utility District that covers portions of Alameda and Contra Costa. Thank you for joining me today.
It is a pleasure, Jared. Thank you so much for inviting me. I love sharing what I've learned about water, and this is a wonderful opportunity to do so.
First, most people are familiar with it, but tell us, what is East Bay MUD? What is your mission? How do you serve the community? Who are your other board members? And a little bit about what you guys do over there as an overview.
Yeah, East Bay MUD is your friendly water utility. We've been around for over 100 years. Back in the early 1920s, folks realized that the private water companies that were serving the East Bay were not able to keep up with the demand, and they were charging exorbitant amounts of money for a gallon of water. The good people of the East Bay at the time voted to get together and form a public district. And what they wanted it to be a public utility, meaning we all own it. And since the 1920s, we have embarked on some incredible infrastructure projects, beginning with the Pardee Dam that was built in 1927. We're approaching the 100th year anniversary of the dam. And the source of water is the Mokelumne River and the watershed surrounding it, which is quite pristine as primarily snow melt that makes its way down to us. A feat of engineering built 3 aqueducts that travel about 90 miles from the dam to Walnut Creek. And at Walnut Creek, it gets split into a couple of different directions, and the water gets further treated and delivered to our homes. The amazing feat of engineering that it takes to bring a drop of water from Pardee Reservoir to our homes is something that I'm particularly proud of, and something that, as you have heard from me now about the aging of the infrastructure, much of it is over 100 years old because we inherited some of it, particularly west of the hills. It's definitely been time for us to invest and do a major infrastructure improvement project, capital project, that you may have noticed East Bay MUD is busy doing in a lot of places. In terms of the board of directors, there are 7 of us. We're all elected, and we each represent an area of our territory. And we serve, as you mentioned, a portion of Contra Costa, a portion of Alameda County. My ward is called Ward 2. It's like a district. And it goes from San Ramon to Lafayette, and it incorporates portions of Walnut Creek and Pleasant Hill. And my fellow board members, it breaks up into the various other districts. And we each serve a 4-year term, and we are elected. And in fact, this year, 4 of us are up for election. It's both a fascinating world to think about, but also super interesting to manage. We are the 2nd largest water district in the state. We have approximately 2,200 employees. We serve 1.5 million people, and it's a wonderful privilege to be able to usher this precious resource to all of us. Wherever I go, I bring my East Bay MUD water, and I'm very proud that it tastes delicious, and people tell me so. And the quality of the water, the affordability of the water, and environmental stewardship are the key things that I'm interested in. You mentioned about the mission of East Bay MUD, and it's to provide high quality, affordable water and do it by being good environmental stewards. And that's very much in our DNA.
And you talked about the 100-year-old dam, a dam that's holding up 100 years old. How is that faring? Are you rebuilding it from scratch? And what are some of the other infrastructure projects you're talking about?
The dam gets thoroughly inspected on a very regular basis by our staff, what we call upcountry. And we have found that it was very solidly built. I had the pleasure of visiting the dam and going inside of its guts, and it is a remarkable feat of engineering. It's doing really well. Staff feel that it should be able to hold up probably for another 100 years. In other words, this was back in the day when things were built to last, and we are grateful that's the case. Now, the aqueducts that bring water, those 90 miles that I mentioned, they need to be lined with cement in order to prevent the metal from corroding, because it turns out the water is so pristine it is actually highly corrosive. And we've needed to reline these 90 miles of aqueduct, portion by portion, little by little. And we're in the midst of embarking on that, which is a huge undertaking. I also had the pleasure of standing inside of one of these aqueducts. They're over 6 feet wide. And the fact that I fit inside it comfortably is amazing. So yeah, we inspect them regularly with cameras, and whenever we notice that there are portions of the lining that have deteriorated, we have to close one of the aqueducts, use the other two, and then do the work, and then come back and reopen it. So the good news is we have a redundancy. There are 3 aqueducts, and we can do that to be able to do the upgrades that are needed.
You talk about how long ago it was built, and they thought through really that redundancy. And you said the aqueducts were built when?
This infrastructure is approaching 100 years old.
And, you know, what's happened to the populations? I know you talked about that was why the district was formed, but you think that those aqueducts 100 years ago were supplying enough water then, but also 100 years later where we're using so much more just based on population and stuff?
I was very surprised to find out that as our population has grown, and since the 1970s, the amount of water that we consume has not increased to the extent that you would think. In fact, it has been going down, the per capita consumption, and the total consumption, because we have been investing in so much conservation and the infrastructure in our own homes now with low flow toilets and faucets and the like. We're actually doing well with regards to the water that's available and the population growth. There's a graph that we like to show that shows the trends in population growth over time, and the fact that water consumption has mostly gone down and then stayed fairly constant. Whenever there has been a drought, the population in our territory responds really well by conserving wonderfully. And then after the drought is done, the rebound is not back to where we used to be. We rebound, but to a lower per capita consumption. This has been the trend that we've been observing over the last few decades, and it's amazing, which basically allows us to do the kind of infill development that we see in our territory and to still be able to guarantee water for them.
And it's the low flow toilets, improved shower heads, improved sprinkler heads, awareness. What are other factors? Why are people not coming back post the drought condition to the same level?
A lot of folks have been converting lawns to drought-tolerant landscaping, and East Bay Mud has been investing in providing incentives and rewards for folks to do so. And so once you change your landscape moving forward, that's a huge water savings, and we've been seeing so many conversions. It's really rewarding to see that.
So the biggest is lose your lawn. Does it go the same with industrial users? There's a lot of office buildings near us, even a gas station, shopping centers that have a lot of grass that they haven't gotten rid of yet in areas that it's not public space. It's just like along the edges or things. How do we convert some of that? And how do we work with those maybe absent landlords or national REITs who own the shopping centers kind of thing?
Turns out that East Bay Mud has been investing and partnering with the Dublin-San Ramon Services District to form a special authority called DURWA, which includes both us and East Bay Mud and the Dublin-San Ramon Services District. And we recycle water for landscaping, for irrigation. And we produce close to 7 million gallons a day that get delivered to primarily the San Ramon and Tri-Valley area. And we are able to offset a lot of drinking water supply by using recycled water. I don't know if you've heard of Purple Pipe, but this is what that is. And we are very proud that we are embarking on an expansion of that so we can continue to supply even more recycled water by partnering with Central Contra Costa Sanitary District, Central San, for long-term supply of wastewater. So in terms of industrial use and landscape use for like parks and cities, If you are relatively close geographically to where this recycled water is coming from, there's a good chance you'll be able to access that for your landscaping. Now, for those who are not, either in proximity to this or not, even commercial customers can take advantage of some of our incentives for replacing their grass.
Talk a little bit more, because you were talking about the expense of the infrastructure for the water and the major technology and construction projects that go through that. There's Purple Pipes, the concept of the recycled wastewater and for non-drinkable, non-farming use. How easy is it? Why can't we just have a ton of that, right? You're talking about laying new pipes and everything.
That was one of my priorities when I first came on the board 2 years ago, was to identify opportunities for expanding our recycled water infrastructure and use. And I quickly found out that there are limits to how much we can use. For one thing, people are conserving at both ends, at the tap and at the toilet. And there are days when there isn't enough flow coming into the recycling facility to supply all the demand. And so, short of getting more wastewater from somewhere else, like right now, we're getting it from the Dublin Center Remote Services District and then supplying it to some of our East Bay Mud customers. But when we finalize this agreement with Central Sand, we'll be able to get more wastewater to recycle and therefore expand our Purple Pipe into areas that are currently not connected.
That's good. And let's backtrack a minute. Tell us a little bit about your background, what inspired you to serve the community in this area. And then I do want to ask you about where water stands today overall in the state of California.
My career path took me as a public servant in public health here in Contra Costa County for many years. And then I went to serve as chief of staff for County Supervisor John Joya for 10 years in West County. And at that point, I learned so much about governing and governance and policymaking and how that works and about the county in general. And then after I worked for him, I served at the Air District, at the Bay Area Air Quality Management District on community engagement, another key thing that helps keep the community engaged and involved and aware of what government is doing. So after coming back to public health, I ended up retiring from public health and having time on my hands. And Dr. Coleman, who had been serving in this role for over 30 years, stepped down and there was a vacancy on the board. So I applied to get appointed and was grateful to be selected among 5 candidates. And then I was elected in November because I was only serving out the beginning by the MUD Act that I had to do that. And now, 2 years later that I'm about to finish his term, I need to get reelected. I'm hoping to get reelected. But that's a long way of saying that my passion has been serving the community and the environment. I also sit on the County Sustainability Commission. And together, public health and the environment and good governance have been my passions.
I appreciate all the time you spent serving our community in the various roles. Talk to me about the water situation in California overall, not just East Bay Mud or at least the Bay Area in Northern California. There's been news articles that we are out of a drought for the first time everywhere in the state. Does that really mean there's plenty of water? Explain that.
I recently participated in a statewide fellowship called Water Education for Latino Leaders, and it was fascinating because we got to tour the state and various locations with respect to water. And I got to see how, relative to other parts of the state, East Bay Mud is so fortunate to have its own source of water and its own infrastructure to deliver that water. Most places in the state are not so fortunate, and they're having to rely on the conveyance of water that happens from Northern California to Southern California or on the Colorado River, or groundwater that is being quickly depleted and is often contaminated. Yes, while we may be out of a drought at the moment, that doesn't mean that a big drought is not around the corner. And water agencies in general who have storage reservoirs like East Bay Mud does, not only at Pardee, but we also have 5 local reservoirs, including like the San Pablo Reservoir and the Lafayette Reservoir and Orinda. We have only a limited amount of water that is on the surface. And next time there's a big drought, we're going to have to rely on water transfers from some of our partners. For example, we invested in infrastructure at Freeport where we can get water from the Sacramento River and deliver it to our customers when there's a big drought. There are good times and there are not so good times with regards to water supply, but at the moment, East Bay mud and most of the California reservoirs are sitting in a good place. It remains to be seen what happens this year with El Nino conditions.
Melt. The snow melt has shifted, right? It melts a lot earlier. In the last couple of seasons, there's less of it. There's now this onslaught of atmospheric rivers. There's these rumors that we lose a lot of the water because it's running off so quick. How is that changing what East Bay Mud does and your role?
Very important. In fact, one of the key challenges facing East Bay Mud is climate change. Not only the anticipated droughts that we've just been talking about, but also the change in water quality. When water temperatures rise, there's more likely development of algae blooms, and the algae blooms, while they may not be harmful in terms of, in other words, that are harmful to the taste and the appearance of the water. And some of our infrastructure was not built to handle this type of algae bloom, and we're having to upgrade our local water treatment facilities to deal with this. And we have seen how climate change has brought more instances of algae blooms. We also worry about the atmospheric rivers when they hit in the wrong place upcountry where our river is and where our watershed is. We end up with a lot of silt flowing into our reservoir. And when that happens, it has to be filtered out at our plants. And sometimes it's hard to keep up with the silt and to make sure that we continue to provide sufficient water for everyone. So climate change has become one of the bigger challenges that East Bay Mud is facing. And it's part of the reason why we are embarking on the types of capital improvement projects that we are. We are improving the Orinda water treatment plant in Walnut Creek. There will be an improvement, a big capital improvement project starting sometime in 27 or 28 to make that water treatment plant able to handle changing water quality, incoming water quality. So yes, that's also why I think East Bay Mud wants to be a leader with respect to greenhouse gas reductions and being able to stick to 2030 greenhouse gas carbon neutrality goal. And we are well on our way to be able to achieve that goal. So we as a district are equally invested in trying to be good neighbors and protect our environment.
That's good to hear. I know you talked about the atmospheric rivers dump a lot of silt in, which then has to be cleaned. Is it the case where we lose a lot of water? Do we need to improve the ability to capture some of that water, or if the snow melts faster, capture some of it?
So we definitely are facing times when we're not getting as much snow melt and it's coming into our reservoir sooner rather than later and not gradually melting. So far, we have not seen the kind of impact to our water supply that we anticipate potentially will happen in the future. And that's why East Bay Mud invests in what we call a water portfolio, where we not only rely on our rainfall and snowmelt water at Pardee Reservoir and our local reservoirs. I should mention about 90% of our water supply comes from the Pardee Reservoir, but we do get some runoff from rains into our local reservoirs. It's about 10% of our water supply. But in the future, we anticipate that we're going to have to do different things differently as that fresh water supply may begin to shrink. One of the things that we are investing in, we completed a pilot project not too long ago called the DREAM Project, where we banked water in a year that we had abundance underground with a partnership with San Joaquin County in the northern San Joaquin Valley. And so we basically were recharging groundwater reservoir. And then to be able to withdraw it and use it for our purposes. And we found that the pilot project worked very well. And the board has recently agreed and funded a project to expand that. So when there is a wet year, we should be able to have the infrastructure to pump more of our excess water supply and have it saved for the drought down the road. And we've also entered into long-term agreements up with some folks in Northern California, like Yuba Water District, to supply water to us when there is a drought, because they tend to have and get more water than we do. And so, yeah, our water portfolio is broad, and thankfully we think far ahead to make sure that we continue to meet our water demand. We've talked about the DREAM project, we've talked about water deliveries from other water agencies, and we've talked about how customers have been consuming less water and using conservation strategies. But we also are starting to think about down the road, not only are we using recycled water for landscaping, but what if there is a day when we're actually going to need to purify that water further to make it potable? So we're starting to think about that as well.
That just the eventual source of rainwater, fresh water, snow melt will all dry out possibly.
Models that we have studied so far wouldn't go that far as to completely drying, but we would be seeing declines, and we're looking out 25 or 30 or further out, that we might need to start tapping into some of these other strategies to supply enough water for our customers.
That's interesting. And that's also very hard to do as an elected official on 4-year cycles. People are like, why am I paying now for 30 years from now? So I really appreciate that outlook. How is technology changing the way you guys do business, both as an administrative agency, work with your customers, fix leaks?
Yes, that's one of the favorite things that I've been heavily supporting at East Bay Mud, is how can we leverage technology to become more efficient and to do what we do better. So one example is a partnership with UC Berkeley, where we help to fund an infrastructure research institute. And part of what that entails is using technology to sense when there is a leak on some of our main water mains, or when the ground is shifting, because we live in earthquake territory. And it's been helping us to pinpoint and identify where are the highest priority areas for us to invest in new infrastructure that would allow us to survive if or when there is a big one in terms of earthquakes. Not that there will not be disruptions, because there definitely will be disruptions, but that we would be able to prevent as many ruptures as possible by transitioning to pipe that is more resilient. So that's one of the ways that we're using infrastructure. We're also investing in broader leak detection technology that allows us to figure out early where there is a leak and go in and fix that pipe before it ruptures, saving water and money. The other thing is, with artificial intelligence, we are starting to look at developing a policy that would basically allow us to harness some of the good things that AI has to offer, so that our employees can become more efficient and more effective, while at the same time protecting jobs. Because we pride ourselves as an agency that we haven't had to lay off individuals even during really hard times. And we don't want to go there even as AI progresses and moves forward. We want to be able to have a smooth transition as best as possible and use the technology to harness and help us be more efficient.
When I've had some AI executives, startup founders on, they all talk about that a good product will keep a human in the loop, but it is how do you make somebody more efficient with their time so that they could do bigger, broader projects and that have a bigger impact, right? So I appreciate you guys looking at the technology. Before we head out, what are some tips you have for people out there about water, saving water, using water, assurances about the future.
One of my pet peeves is I really would love everybody to be prepared for an earthquake. The message needs to get out there that there will be water disruptions and they will last more than 3 days. We would like people to save 2 gallons per person per day for a week, longer if you're able. And that will get you enough water to where East Bay Mud and all of the response agencies would be able to deploy local water supplies like tankers with water where you could go and replenish your supply. I want people to understand that while we are as prepared as we possibly can be and continue to be working on being more prepared, the Hayward Fault is scheduled to rupture at some point in the future, and we all need to be prepared. And the more that we are, and I personally have my supply of water stored in cubes under the stairs, and I'm happy to say that I've checked that box, and I hope everybody in our water territory is able to do the same. The other key message I would like folks to get is that water agencies like East Bay Mud were not built to manage wildfires. We were built to manage structural fires in cities, houses, buildings, that sort of thing. And people tend to think that we were built to be able to deliver unlimited amounts of water to handle a significant wildfire. So that's another message that I would like folks to be able to know, is that we were just not engineered to handle that. And that's why we partner with fire agencies throughout our territory, find out how else can we partner better, what else can we be doing other than assuring that every single water hydrant is functioning and that the water pressure will be there to the extent that we're able to keep the water pressure going. So that's another message that's important. And then lastly, I would love to encourage folks, especially in Ward 2, which is out here east of the hills where it gets much hotter, transition yards to the extent possible to water tolerant and drought tolerant landscaping, because it'll save you money and they can look beautiful.
The earthquake thing makes a lot of sense. I lived in Florida for a long time and had always had water for hurricanes. We should do the same here because earthquakes are a lot less predictable. When you talked about the fire safety and working to test fire hydrants to make sure that they have water and working with the fire departments, how do you actually do that?
Warning day anywhere in our territory. We purposely fill all of our reservoirs to the brim. That gives us extra time. Like if a fire were to break out, then we wouldn't have to spend time filling them to the brim. We've already done that ahead of time. We don't keep all of our reservoirs filled to the brim all the time because as water comes in, water goes out, and we just keep an amount there that makes sense. But during those red flag warning days, we purposely go in and fill to the brim every reservoir that could potentially be helpful should a fire break out in those areas. So that's one way that we prepare, and our fire agencies are fully aware of this as well. In terms of the fire hydrants, we have an inspection program where we inspect at least 10% of our fire hydrants in our territory every year. And we have over 30,000 of them. So it's a lot to do.
30,000 a year.
There are valves that need to be tested, pressure that needs to be tested. And we have teams that are doing this all the time.
I think you got to just be on top of it. I think that's a key message in that is you always have to be out there. You have to be in the field. You have to be investing in your infrastructure.
Exactly. Our customers and our folks can be kind of rest assured that East Bay Mud is working 24/7 to be as prepared as possible for the future. We are constantly looking ahead. What's happening with climate change, what's happening with water quality, with snow melt, what's happening with our infrastructure. I think we're proud to say that because we all own this system, we hope that our customers will realize that we need to continue to invest in it. It's like keeping your home in good shape also requires investment. What could be more precious than to be able to deliver water to every customer 24/7, regardless of what threats might be out there. And just to be on the safe side, yes, we do have 31,000 public fire hydrants.
Anything else you want to share?
Yeah, I would just say that it has been and continues to be a huge privilege to serve Ward 2, the residents of from San Ramon to Lafayette and covering portions of Walnut Creek and Pleasant Hill. It's been a huge privilege to serve my constituents for the past 2 years, and I look forward to continuing to do so. And that, I'm passionate about being a steward of both the financial resources and the natural resources that we are entrusted with. And I love what I do. And I've become a water geek, and I welcome anyone who has any questions to reach out to me. And you could reach me at luz4ebmud@gmail.com. And it's LUZ, the number 4.
Great. Thank you for being with us, Luz Gomez from East Bay Mud. Appreciate your insights.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on, Jared.
Today.
Thanks for listening to the Capstone Conversation. Don't forget to subscribe and follow Jared Asch and Capstone Government Affairs on LinkedIn. Leave us a review and share this episode with a friend.